What if I told you that everything you're looking at right now, every shrub, every perennial, every ground cover filling this side yard, cost me a grand total of $0 in plant material? Not discount rack prices. Not end of season clearance. Zero. The average homeowner spends somewhere between $4 and $12 per square foot on professional landscaping. And a lot of that cost is just the plants themselves. I didn't spend a cent on a single one. Every plant you see came from a cutting, a division, a seed, or a please take this, I'm digging it out anyway from a neighbor. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how I did it, step by step, so you can do the same thing in your own yard. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm someone who got tired of looking at a long, narrow, completely neglected side yard. You know the kind, the strip between your house and the fence that nobody ever does anything with because it's awkward, it's shaded for half the day, and it always feels like the lowest priority space on the property. A couple of years ago, I decided that side yard was going to become a real garden. The problem was my budget. Side yards are long and narrow, which actually means you need a lot of plants to fill them, and buying that many plants from a nursery would have run me into the hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. So instead, I built the entire thing using plant propagation, taking cuttings, dividing existing plants, collecting seeds, and trading with other gardeners. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the whole process, why propagation is such a powerful and underused strategy, exactly how I planned the space, the specific propagation techniques I used for different plant types, the mistakes I made along the way so you don't have to repeat them, and a realistic timeline for what this actually takes. By the end of this video, you'll have a complete blueprint for turning your own neglected side yard, or any patch of dirt, really, into a full garden without spending much, if anything, on plants. Why propagation is the smartest way to landscape on a budget. Let's start with the why, because I think this is the part most people skip, and it's actually the most important. When people think about cheap landscaping, they usually think about buying small plants and waiting for them to grow, or shopping clearance sections for half-dead perennials. Those are fine strategies, but they still cost money, and you're limited by what's in stock. Propagation flips that completely. Instead of buying plants, you're making plants from material that already exists, often material that would otherwise be thrown away. Most perennials, many shrubs, and a huge number of houseplants and outdoor plants can be propagated from cuttings, divisions, or seeds. A single mature hosta, for example, can often be divided into 4, 6, or even 10 new plants in one afternoon. A single rosemary or sage plant can produce dozens of cuttings over a growing season. That's not a one-time discount. That's an exponential multiplier on your plant budget. There's also a timing advantage that people don't talk about enough. Spring and fall, when many gardeners are dividing overgrown perennials or cutting back shrubs, is exactly when free plant material is most abundant. People are actively trying to get rid of extra plants. You're not asking for a favor. You're often doing them one. Step 1. Assess and map your space. Before collecting a single plant, I spent about a week just observing the side yard. I tracked how much sun each section got throughout the day. Morning sun near the front, deep shade in the middle where the neighbor's fence and a large tree block light, and a strip of late afternoon sun near the back gate. I also checked drainage by watching where water pooled after rain, and I tested the soil with a simple at-home kit to get a rough sense of pH and composition. This mattered enormously for a propagation-based approach, because when you're collecting free plants, you don't get to special order the perfect plant for a spot. You take what's available and figure out where it fits. Mapping the light and moisture zones in advance meant that when I came home with, say, a bag of hosta divisions, I already knew exactly which shaded, moist section they were going into. I sketched a rough zone map, a shade zone, a part sun zone, a dry/sunny zone near the gate, and a transition zone in the middle. Every plant I propagated or collected got slotted into one of those zones based on its needs. Step 2. Build your free plant pipeline. This is the core of the whole project. So let's break it into the specific sources I used. Your own yard first. Before looking anywhere else, I walked around my own property and identified plants that were overgrown or could be divided without harming them. I had an overcrowded clump of daylilies in the front yard that hadn't bloomed well in years because they were too dense. Dividing that clump gave me 8 separate daylily plants, all for free, and actually improved the health of the original planting. Cuttings from friends, family, and neighbors. I asked around, literally just texted people, "Hey, can I take a few cuttings from your plant?" Most gardeners are flattered to be asked and happy to share. From this, I got cuttings of sedum, coleus, and a butterfly bush. Online plant swap groups. Local gardening groups on social media are full of people giving away divisions, seedlings, and cuttings, often because they have too many and need to thin them out. I picked up free ornamental grasses, hosta divisions, and a small lilac sucker this way. Curbside free piles. When people redo their landscaping, they often pile up perennials at the curb with a free sign. I found a whole bag of iris rhizomes this way. Iris are tough enough to survive a few days out of the ground and transplant beautifully. Seed saving. At the end of the growing season, I collected seeds from coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, and zinnias from my own garden and a friend's garden. Seeds cost nothing to store and let you grow dozens of plants from a single seed head. Step 3. Propagation techniques, plant by plant. Different plants need different propagation methods, so here's a quick breakdown of what I actually used. Division was my workhorse technique for perennials like hostas, daylilies, ornamental grasses, and iris. You dig up the whole clump, and using a sharp spade or even your hands, separate it into smaller sections, each with its own roots and growth points. Replant immediately and water well. This is best done in early spring or early fall when the plant isn't actively flowering. Stem cuttings work great for woody and semi-woody plants like sedum, coleus, and butterfly bush. You cut a 4 to 6 inch piece of stem just below a leaf node, strip the lower leaves, and place it in water or moist potting soil. Many cuttings will root within 2 to 4 weeks. Sedum is almost absurdly easy. You can often just lay a broken off piece on the soil, and it will root on its own. Layering was useful for the lilac sucker and a creeping ground cover I picked up. You bend a low-growing stem down to the soil, bury part of it while keeping the tip exposed, and it will often root at the buried section while still attached to the parent plant. Once rooted, you cut it free as a new, independent plant. Seed starting I used for the coneflowers and black-eyed Susans. Many native perennial seeds actually need a cold period to germinate well, a process called cold stratification, which you can mimic by placing seeds in a damp paper towel inside a plastic bag in the fridge for several weeks before planting. Common mistakes to avoid. I made every one of these mistakes at least once, so let me save you the trouble. The biggest one was overcrowding. When you're propagating, plants are small and it's tempting to cram in as many as possible because, hey, they're free. But most perennials and shrubs grow significantly larger than they appear at planting time, and overcrowding leads to poor air circulation, disease, and plants competing for resources. I had to dig up and relocate several plants the following year because I'd planted them too close together. The second mistake was timing. I took some cuttings in the middle of summer during a heat wave, and most of them didn't survive. They dried out faster than they could root. Spring and early fall are far more forgiving for most propagation methods. The third was skipping the hardening off process for plants that had been propagated indoors or in more sheltered conditions. Moving a tender new plant directly into full sun or exposed wind can shock or kill it. Gradually introducing new plants to outdoor conditions over a week or so made a huge difference in survival rates. Finally, I underestimated how important matching plant needs to the zones I'd mapped really was. A couple of sun-loving sedum cuttings that I impatiently stuck in the shady middle zone just because that's where I had space simply never thrived. Patience in placement matters as much as patience in propagation. Putting it all together, a realistic timeline. This whole side yard wasn't a weekend project, and I wanted to be upfront about that. The bulk of the structure went in over one spring, using divisions and curbside finds. Cuttings I'd started in late summer of the previous year were ready to plant out by that same spring. Seeds I'd collected and cold stratified over winter were started indoors in late winter and transplanted once the weather warmed. By the following fall, about a year and a half after starting, the yard had filled in to the point where it looked genuinely established, full layered, and honestly hard to tell apart from a professionally landscaped bed. So to recap, The entire side yard you've been looking at throughout this video was built using divisions from my own overgrown plants, cuttings shared by friends and neighbors, free finds from online plant swap groups and curbside piles, and seeds I collected and started myself. The keys to making this work were mapping out my light and moisture zones before I started collecting plants, matching propagation techniques to the right plants, division, cuttings, layering, and seed starting, timing my propagation efforts for spring and fall, and avoiding the overcrowding and impatience mistakes that I made early on. If this video helped you see your own side yard or any neglected corner of your property a little differently, I'd really appreciate a like. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who are trying to garden on a budget. And if you've got a free plant source or propagation tip I didn't mention, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And honestly, some of my best tips have come from viewers. If you haven't already, hit subscribe because next week I'm taking you through the exact propagation station setup I used to root dozens of cuttings at once indoors during the winter, including the cheap container hacks that work just as well as expensive propagation trays. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.